coming up on Wrestling Life.
And it was funny when the Hall of Fame was done, I came up and I tapped Kofi Kingston on the shoulder. I said, "Are you Kofi?" And he says, "Yeah." He was Demolition. And I said, "Congratulations for beating our record, you son of a gun." Really, really good guy, him and his partner. And he said, "I'm sorry we broke it." And I said, "Don't be sorry, be excited." And I'm excited for you because somebody had to break it. It's just great that a couple of good guys took it from us,
This is Wrestling Life with Ben Veal, the show that celebrates wrestling's past, present, and future with real talk from real talent.
Hello and welcome to an extremely special episode of Wrestling Life. Without question, this is the biggest episode of the show so far because I have not one, but two legendary guests joining me in the studio today. Together, my guests were one of the most dominant tag teams of all time. 3-time WWF Tag Team Champions, their record reign with the titles took decades to be surpassed, and they undoubtedly have gone down into the history books as bona fide Hall of Famers. The 8-year-old wrestling fan that's still inside me is over the moon that I'm about to say this, and the adult wrestling fan presenting this show still can't quite believe that they're my guests on my show. So without further ado, here comes the axe, here comes the smasher. My special guests are, of course, Bill Axe Eadie and Barry Smash Darsow. Gentlemen, welcome to the show. How are you?
Oh, pleasure to be here, my friend. Glad to meet you.
Very good, Ben. Good to see you again.
You too, Barry. I last year when we did an interview together, you and I together, I said, do you think there's ever any chance that we could get Bill on here as well and we can do a Demolition special? And the stars have aligned. We are here and it's going to be a lot of fun today.
And it's pretty special to have Bill on here because usually, he'll say, "Oh, crap, what do we want to do that for?" Right, Bill?
Yeah, when I'm home, I'm home. When I'm on the road, I'm on the road.
And then whenever he asks me, I say, "What the heck do I want to do that for?" But we love doing these.
Did you arm wrestle him into this?
No, he said you were a good guy, so I said if he gives you the positive, then we're going to do it.
Good stuff. Well, look, I'm gonna start off with a question for you, Bill, because I want to know whether Barry was telling me the truth when he told this last year. So he said that he's always kind of you've been very much as kind of a big brother role to him, and that he's always, whenever you're traveling, he always gives you the front seat, the seat up front. He always looks after you. He always puts you first. Is this true?
Wait a minute. He takes the front seat, for God's sakes. But he's a good guy to be with. He is like a brother. So it's, we have no disagreements. We have no arguments. And when we go out for business and get our job done and then come back home.
When was the first time you both met?
Well, we knew of each other through friends, Ivan Koloff and a number of individuals. But the first time we met was, I don't know the year. I don't know the date. I got part-timers, not Alzheimer's, but we met in Charlotte when we were deciding on the partnership. And, of course, I had checked with Ivan and a number of other people, and they all gave him rave reviews and said he was a good guy. And then, of course, when I met him, I agreed with their observations. So we had no problems from day one.
And of course, Barry, you knew Bill well, didn't you, by reputation as the masked superstar? So the idea of being paired up with, a legendary performer like Bill was a tantalizing prospect for you.
Oh, it was incredible when I sat down with Vince and he says, you'd be partners with Bill Eadie, and right away, I was a Masked Superstar fan, and I knew it was going to be a good tag team. It wasn't going to be just a couple of guys that was put together. I knew there was some thought to it, and I knew it was going to end up, getting a push. And, all my friends that, I knew, they all knew who Bill was and said he's a great guy. He's going to be a great partner to be with.
So just kind of catching everyone up on where you are, like today in 2025. I mean, there's a lot going on in the world of Demolition. Like you've just launched your own podcast, the Demo Pod. You signed your WWE Legends deal earlier this year. You've got new action figures coming out. I mean, big things happening in the world of Demolition right now.
Well, we've been busy, thank goodness. God's looking out after us. And like you said, we got a demo pod that I think is going to be interesting for the fans.
Yeah.
They've got an opportunity to ask questions and get some inside information about the business. A number of action figures. We did sign the contract. We visited Las Vegas and went to the Hall of Fame ceremonies at a request of WWE. So, yeah, I think it's going to be an interesting, not only now, but in the foreseeable future.
Yeah, I spotted Barry's face in the Hall of Fame in the big crowd. I could just see his face smiling away during Typhoon's induction.
Well, the only thing that was bad about that we had good seats. We were close to the stage, but the seats were like coach seats in an airplane. We were just crammed in there.
I was thinking that, watching that, I was thinking that doesn't look very comfortable for a 4-hour show.
Well, what was funny was I think it was kind of a rib on their what they did, because when we got in there, here's the Warlord, the Barbarian, me, and then Bill in these little tiny seats, and everybody up there on the WWE, they're probably laughing their heads off, going, "Yeah, 4 of the biggest guys out here sitting next to each other." But I tell you, it was great to see Typhoon in there. We both love him, and it's terrible that John's not alive to be able to be there too. But it was a good ceremony.
Yeah, it really was. And of course, another one of your very storied rivals, who I know is you're both very fond of, Bret Hitman Hart, also becoming a 3-time inductee.
Yeah, that was unique. I wasn't aware that that was going to happen until probably the day before that. But I mean, Bret's a great performer, so I mean, and so is Austin. So both of them deserve it.
I quite like the concept of inducting matches. It does open up a whole different scope for the Hall of Fame going forward.
Well, I'd hate to be the guy that has to judge them, or the person or the committee, because there's so many great matches. I mean, it's like being nominated for the hall itself. I mean, there's so many good individuals and teams. It'd be hard to narrow it down.
Yeah, and having selected my first kind of class of Hall of Fame for myself this year for Wrestling Life, and already being on the receiving ends of lots of comments on social media of, why isn't this person in? Why isn't this person in? It's not an easy process.
I'll tell you what was really impressive is Bill and I, when we got to the Hall of Fame, we were in a room with Triple H. Everybody was in there, and Nash was in there, Stone Cold Austin, and right away CM Punk came up to us and introduced himself, and just a really, really good guy. And then Bruce Pritchard came up, give him a little hug and the whole deal, and Undertaker's wife came up, and it was just a really good thing, because we've been away from it for so long with these people coming up to us, the Undertaker and Booker T and everybody. So it was quite nice.
Yeah, and it's it's a step closer to you receiving your very well deserved recognition, which I'm sure is coming. I mean, it's been close to 35 years since the two of you were inside a WWF ring competing together. Does it surprise you how much love and attention you're still being shown by fans here in 2025?
Well, it's nice. The atmosphere has changed considerably. There doesn't seem to be animosity towards ex-wrestlers or ex-employees. And like Barry said, it was heartwarming, because we were just like brought back into the family again, back into the house. And that was nice.
Yeah, as it should be. It feels like it's a company that's gone through a very big evolution recently and is really really growing up now in terms of its mindset. And it's great to see some of the people kind of returning, as you say, who a few years ago wouldn't have been able to do that. And I think, from what I can see, Triple H has played a pretty sizable part in kind of overcoming some of those past historical rifts that were there.
Yeah, he's got a great responsibility. I mean, you look at all the activity and the planning and the changes and this and that. It's probably a 24.5-hour day job.
Yeah, and you know what else about him? It seems like all of the people really respect him for what he's doing. You know, the position that he's in, I think he really sits down and talks to a lot of the wrestlers, gives them his insight and everything. And I think everybody really listens to him. I think he's doing a really good job.
And what do you think of the tag team scene in the WWE these days? Because it feels to me like we're starting to see a real comeback of more focus on the tag team division again than we've had in quite a long time.
Well, I'll be very honest. I haven't had an opportunity to watch too much wrestling, so I'd hate to make a judgment call, but I know for a fact that all of them are great athletes. I see it periodically. So, I don't follow the lines and the storylines, and I couldn't tell you 4 or 5 different teams, but I know that they're all athletic.
But,
and I started watching some of them, and the tag teams, it seems like they are coming back, and it was funny when the Hall of Fame was done, I came up and I tapped Kofi Kingston on the shoulder. I said, "Are you Kofi?" And he says, "Yeah." It was Demolition. And I said, "Congratulations for beating our record, you son of a gun," and we laughed and everything. And I mean, really, really good guy, him and his partner. And, but the tag teams, I think, are getting better, and they're making more tag teams now.
Well, you had a very, very good run. I think it was a good 25 years before that record was broken by the New Day. So that's not bad. And every record has to be broken eventually, doesn't it?
Right. And that's kind of what because he said, "I'm sorry we broke it." And I said, "Don't be sorry, be excited." And, and I'm excited for you because somebody had to break it. It's just great that a couple of good guys took it from us,
Absolutely. So the time my Demolition journey began was actually when you were quite near the end of your road together, because the first time I ever saw you, and this is just due to my age and when I became a fan, the first match I ever saw of yours was WrestleMania 6. So that was the first WrestleMania I ever watched as a 7-year-old boy, I think I would have been back then, on VHS. And I remember being absolutely blown away by your entrance and the outfits and everything. I hadn't ever seen anything like it in my life. And then, of course, watching you win the titles from Andre and Haku. I believe that ended up being Andre's last match in the Federation as his health and mobility waned. Can you take me back to that night and what it was like to work with Andre and obviously make history in front of 60,000 plus fans?
Well, we weren't aware of course, that was his last match. I mean, we knew that he wasn't feeling well, but he was scheduled to go to Japan after that. And, fortunately, we had worked with Andre for many, many times. I had worked with him a number of times as a single, as Mass Superstar, against him and as his partner. And then Barry and I, of course, had the series against him. So every time we had an opportunity to get in the ring, it was fun. And anybody that knows Andre, if he doesn't like you, you're not going to get anything done. But he did like us, and consequently, we had good matches with him, and he trusted us.
Did you know going into that match that you were going to have to really kind of protect him and work around where his health was at the time?
Not really. I don't believe so. Do you think so, Barry?
No, because we worked with him many times before that, and we always worked the same with him, and he was so easy. He would do anything for you, It wasn't like you were working around him. It was just that was his gimmick and that was our gimmick, I thought.
And of course, I mean, you had so many kind of legendary clashes. I mean, we mentioned it earlier. Obviously, the Heart Foundation jumped to mind immediately for me. Powers of Pain, the Brain Busters. Which of all the teams you worked with would you say you either pushed you the hardest or that you had the best chemistry with?
Oh God, that would be hard. We get asked that a number of times, to be really honest with you, and we had good matches with the Hearts. We had good matches with the Bulldogs. We had good matches with the Strike Force and Andre and Haku and Akeem and One Man Gang. We were just fortunate. I mean, there was good teams galore from top to bottom, and any one of those teams could be your opponent that night. So we look forward to any night.
You know, I think though the one team that probably pushed us a little bit more was probably the Brain Busters. You know, don't you agree? They made you work where before it was we made everybody else work, but now all of a sudden we were baby faces, and they made us work. They made us work. But I think the ones we clicked with it's like you said, we kind of clicked with everybody we had good matches with.
But I've heard you say in interviews before. I mean, I think you had a particularly good relationship with Brett and Jim, didn't you?
Yeah. Brett and Jim were probably we probably had more matches with them as a tag than anybody, and you know, we were both such good friends with them and everything, and they would do anything we wanted, you know, to do, and vice versa. So it was just ended up being great matches.
Yeah, and also when you look at that match on a screen and you watch it back now with the Demolition gimmick and with the Heart Foundation gimmick, it really kind of epitomizes to me when wrestling was fun. To be honest, for lack of a better term, just when it takes me back to the escapist joy that I had as a very young boy watching wrestling, and how larger than life it all was, which I don't think that's there as much anymore. I think I've got young sons now myself who are about the same age as I was when I got into it, and it's obviously still very over the top and big as a presentation, but I think the characters are fewer and far between now that would really attract a young fan.
Well, I think that, like I said, I think they're great athletes, but I'm not able to critique it so much because I don't watch that often and I don't know the storylines. But, you know, when we were out in Vegas, there was a lot of people that were excited about meeting so-and-so and so-and-so and so-and-so. So I'm sure that they're larger than life to some people.
Yes.
And it was nice because they could remember us too. I mean, it was really nice to be remembered. And I think that Barry and I were talking, I think that we probably had our biggest WrestleCon signing this past one. Yeah.
Wow. Yeah, I think because there was quite a long time, I think, where you weren't... How long have you been doing the kind of conventions for together as a team?
Oh, my goodness, man. Maybe, what would you say, Barry, 12, 15 years, I think?
Yeah. And, you know, when we started, it was almost like, you know, why are people going to come and see us and sign autographs? You know, and then after you meet a few and you have a few of the conventions and everything, then you can start seeing the excitement and everything. And who would ever think that, you know, we're going out almost every weekend to different parts of the country and meeting all these people, and they're all there. You know, we leave this weekend for Saskatoon, and you know, it's a huge thing. So it's, you know, who would ever think that this many years later, still the Demolition is out there and with everybody.
Title Run Toys Series 1. Dangerous Danny Davis. Wrath. Juventud Guerrera. Ernest the Cat Miller. And Mr. Wonderful Paul Orndorff. Coming to the ring soon.
But that's the connection you guys had, and that's how iconic the team was. I mean, going back to kind of how it first came about. Presumably, Bill, you were obviously first to see it because Barry came later into the fold. Can you remember who pitched you the concept and how you felt when you first saw the creative for Demolition, so the presentation of it?
Oh, it was Randy Colley. It was
Right.
Randy had approached me,
Right.
and he said that he had this concept and he had some ideas, and some of them were good, some of them we had to tweak, some of them were bad, and we eliminated. And then we proposed it to Vince. He had already talked to Vince about it, and Vince liked the concept. And then we had our first two matches. And unfortunately for Randy, who was the original Smash at that time, when he took off the entrance ring mask, everybody in the building both times recognized him. They liked the characters, they liked the outfits and the appearance, but they knew who he was right away. So after the second day, I had already made plans to go to Japan. So after the second day, we got back in the locker room and I told him, I said, this character is going to work. This gimmick is going to work, but it's not going to work with you, Randy. And since you came up with the basic idea, I'll step aside because I'm going to Japan anyway. And he said, no, you're absolutely right. It's not going to work with me. And then I had told Vince how I felt, and he agreed. And that's when we came up with the idea of finding a replacement for Randy. And at that time, he suggested there was about 4 people that he gave me names of. They were already in the territory or had just left. And I told him, I said, it's not going to work. It's going to be the same thing. They're going to, as soon as they take off the exterior mask, they're going to recognize him.
Yep.
And he agreed. And then I went to Japan, and then that's when he met up with Barry. So Barry can take it from there.
Yeah. So that was right when, I was partners with Ivan and Nikita Koloff, and I had a falling out with those guys, and I actually quit wrestling. I thought, I'm going to take a break and I'm going to go to Japan or, go to another territory or whatever. And that's when Earl Hebner came up to me and he said, Barry, he says, hey, should I call my brother? His brother was a referee up there with Vince. Should I have him talk to Vince for you? And I told him, I said, yeah, for sure, not thinking anything was going to happen. And then I was in Ricky Steamboat's gym, and Ricky says, yeah, I heard about the falling out you had with Crockett and all that stuff. And he says, you want me to call Vince for you? And I said, shoot, yeah. Well, Ricky says, well, hold on. So Ricky went behind the counter and he called Vince right there. And he says, yeah, I just talked to Vince. He's going to give you a call. So it was actually about 2 days later, the phone rings and it's Vince. And Vince told me that he talked to Ricky and talked to Hebner, and he invited me up there. And then when we sat down and talked, they had this idea and they didn't really tell me what it was. And then when I told them I was, really wanting a job up there, then they mentioned this and showed me some pictures of what the character was going to look like. And Vince says, how would you like to do it? I said, count me in. I'm for sure. And he says, well, Bill Eadie would be the one that would be your partner, and I have to check with him first. And if he likes you and thinks you're going to be a good partner, then you'll have a job being the Demolition. If not, we'll find something else for you. So that's kind of how I came in the mix of things at that time.
And you first meet, and did you just click straight away?
Oh, it was unbelievable.
Yeah, we did. Go ahead, Barry.
Yeah, it was, right away, we knew all the same people. We became friends right away. When we got in the ring, after the first match, it was just like everything just worked. I wasn't, somebody that needed to win all the time. Bill wasn't like that. It didn't matter if I sold or he sold or whatever. It was just a really good team right from the very beginning.
Yeah, because there's such a skill to tag team wrestling, isn't there? I mean, in terms of making sure that you're striking that balance between styles, making sure that one one partner isn't dominant over the other, that you both get your ring time, that it both all feeds the storyline of a narrative of a match. There's a lot that goes into tag team wrestling, isn't there?
Well, I think that you have to be, and we always tried to have the best match on the card.
Yeah.
Sometimes we were successful at that, sometimes we weren't, but we gave it our best effort. And like Barry said, neither one of us was worried about, do I look better or do I sell better or am I more aggressive? It was what's best for the team, because the team's the one that's going to have the longevity. And, like Barry said, after the initial match, definitely after the second, we knew that it was going to work. I mean, it was clicking good. I could pick up some moves that I knew he was going to do and vice versa. And we were just working for the match. We weren't working for who's better and who's not better and who's going to be the dominant. And I think that, like you mentioned, to be successful as a tag team, you have to be for the team first. You just can't put two individuals in there and hope they're going to mesh. They have to mesh. And that's what we did.
And then on top of that, everybody in the territory knew that here's this new tag team, and they knew Bill's this top guy, and I'm coming in from North Carolina. And right away, they knew we were going to get a push. And they could see the gimmick and see our look and everything. So then now they're, and I'm just thinking what they're thinking. It was like there was a little bit of, well, what are they going to do with us now? Because every team thinks that they're going to get the spot to be the tag team champions. So when we were working with a lot of these guys, and Bill, you'll have to, chime in on this too, but it was almost like some of the guys didn't really want to work with you like they normally worked. But then after we worked with the guys and they seen, that we were all business and wanted the match to look good, then pretty soon everybody trusted us and wanted to have matches with us. Isn't that kind of how you saw it, Bill?
Yeah, I think that would sum it up good, because this wrestling business can be a kind of a vicious, cutthroat business. But I think that they realized we weren't out after to kill them. We were out after having the best match. And if they're going to give us a push, that means we're going to work with top talent. And if they're going to work with us, they're working with top talent, and you're going to make more money.
Right.
Is there anyone that you wish you'd had a chance to work with, but you didn't get to from that era?
Oh, goodness. Of the teams that were there, probably not. I'd have to think of some teams, maybe like the Hardys or some of the teams that they have now, like the Usos, or teams that were much later than us.
Yeah.
But of the teams that we had at that time, that era, no, we worked with about everybody that we wanted to.
And of course, you're kind of in the WWF at such a fascinating time, because you're kind of both you've seen the territories, and then you're here as the Federation really takes over the United States, and Vince McMahon flips the entire model on its head. How was it to kind of be part of that movement where the World Wrestling Federation becomes this absolute American institution?
Well, I have to give credit to Vince for that, because, he had a vision, probably had a lot of doubters, had more doubters than people that thought he was going to be successful. When you're in the forest, you don't see the trees. There's too many of them. Yeah. So we were just going from one town to the next, and all of a sudden you're going from the East Coast to the West Coast, back to the East Coast. It's a little different than it was in the Georgia territory or the Mid-Atlantic territory or any other place where you're home periodically. Sometimes we were gone for 12, 15 days in a row. So, yeah, the concept, I have to give him credit. It was awe-inspiring, really.
Bill, what's funny is I was in Louisiana, and our territory was just on fire, and the top guys were the Junkyard Dog, Hacksaw Duggan, Terry Taylor, and then the Rock and Roll Express. I mean, that was the guys that you wanted to work with as baby faces. And after one of the matches, I was with the Junkyard Dog, and he said, "Can you keep this confidential?" And I said, "Yeah." He says, "I got a call from Vince McMahon. I'm going to sign a contract with him. I'm leaving here. It's going to be incredible." And I said, "Why would you leave there when you got this, you know?" And he says, "Vince is going to take over the world." And I started laughing. I was like, "Yeah, right." And he says, "No, he's got USA TV. He's stealing the top talent from every territory around the country, and he's going to make it happen." And I'll never forget that when he told me that. And that's exactly what Vince did.
Yeah.
Do you remember when that happened, where you were when all that happened? You were probably working for him then.
Well, I may have been, but I think I was in Japan when I first heard the concept. And then, of course, when he took over the Georgia territory. Yeah, but I mean, I don't think anybody really had the belief that it was going to happen, but he did it.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's incredible to see, you know, what that business has become now.
So Ben, when all this was happening here, what was it like in England? You know, how were the TV shows and everything there, and how was that going on there then?
Well, what's interesting, so of course in the UK, we obviously grew up on British wrestling and Big Daddy and Giant Haystacks and World of Sport. So it was very much, wrestling was an institution for a generation. And there was a time when Saturday afternoon wrestling would attract, you know, a higher viewership than football or cricket. I mean, it was huge. I believe it was 1988 when the decision was made to suddenly take British wrestling off the airwaves. Where it had been a mainstay on ITV for decades, and that was really where the WWF got its first opportunity in, I believe it was 89 or 90 with Rupert Murdoch and Sky TV coming in, and that was, you know, WWF was one of the key things that really helped Sky TV to become a major contender in the UK. And what was interesting was, unless you had Sky TV in the UK, you had no access to this product. So for a generation of fans like me, you were divided by either you had access to the WWF or you didn't. So, for example, when I mentioned WrestleMania 6 being the first WrestleMania I ever saw, that was 2 years old by the time I saw it. That was a double VHS from my friend's rental store. I mean, we were reliant, if we got news, it was the WWF magazine, which was probably 3 months out of date, or you were reliant on your friends, hoping someone who was lucky enough to have Sky TV would record you the VHS of that week's superstars. So we were so starved, which I think is why when the WWF started doing its tours in, I think the first big one was 1990, but 1991, when they started doing their tours, I mean, we were so starved for content. I mean, but when people came over, they were, you know, unbelievable superstars. I've heard stories of, kind of sign-ins of the Bushwhackers being overtaken in Bristol by these frenzied fans who couldn't believe that the Bushwhackers were there. I mean, everyone that came over to the UK was as a superstar, as you got to experience, Barry, with SummerSlam 92. A show that would never have been able to happen in the US in 1992 because the WWF wasn't drawing domestically, but could sell out our biggest stadium in a heartbeat. So I think American wrestling has always held a very, very special place in the heart of a generation of fans, but it's somewhat, it came at the expense of obviously the heritage of the British scene. And I think for a long time, British wrestling has struggled to find its foothold because the American wrestling and the imports of the WWF and the WCW were so pervasive.
Right. And I think what really did it was his TV. I mean, his production and everything. He just knew how to do it.
Mm. And what's very interesting over on this side of the Atlantic, one of the things which was a real game changer, which then went over to the US, was the the introduction of sticker albums, so trading cards and then sticker albums. That was how a whole generation of young wrestling fans became addicted to the WWF. Was they collected stickers before they even watched the program. They were collecting larger than life stickers and trading cards before they even watched a match. So it was a very, very clever marketing strategy of kind of finding the young children, getting them excited about these colourful characters, and then the family comes along too. Yeah, so I
noticed when we were at WrestleCon, there was a lot of people that had trading cards. I think they're making a comeback. They went through the signing cards for a period of time, then action figures and all kind of things. Now the trading cards is coming back. So I was interested in seeing that.
Yeah, they've made a really big comeback. I mean, it's either you collect trading cards, or like me, you scour the internet for old Hasbro's, like my little repo man, but I picked up recently.
And there was a lot of UK people out there at that WrestleCon too, wasn't there, Bill?
Oh yeah, quite a few. Yeah, it's always nice to chat with the fans that come there, because they're international. Yeah. I mean, it's like the biggest thing around for wrestling fans, and we met probably, I want to say, 30 or 35 from UK, and then Germany, and then all over India, and you name it. That's the nice part about it. Not only here in the States and Canada, but all over the world come. Japan.
I think that's the wonderful thing about wrestling, is it's the universal language, isn't it? I mean, we're all talking today, united by a common bond. I feel like I know you both so well because I spent 30 odd years watching you on TV. So you're all united by the characters and the storylines and coming together for it. And all of my greatest friendships in this world are forged through wrestling, and then the relationships develop and they nourish, and you learn everything else about them, but we still come together to watch WrestleMania, and inevitably we always get back to talking about our kind of childhood memories. But a big childhood memory that obviously still sticks very vividly in my mind is obviously your theme music, and I constantly have that playing in my head. When was the time that you first had that music introduced to you, and can you remember how you felt about hearing it for the first time? Because it's an incredible track.
I believe we were in Madison Square Garden getting ready for a match, and Jimmy Hart came down the hallway and asked us, he said, I want you guys to listen to this, see if you like it. And we loved it from day one.
Yeah.
And before that, years ago, there was no entrance music, or only for one or two people. But there again, that was another step of moving forward, where not only one or two guys had it, everybody had it. And we always thought that set the stage for our, we hadn't come out from behind the curtain yet, but the music and the atmosphere is already pounding outside there. So they're expecting us to come out and kick butt.
And I think, Bill, when he first came to us there, wasn't it just the music and no
lyrics?
Yeah, no lyrics to it. And this is going to be good. And Jimmy said, he goes, you guys are going to love this. And then when we first heard it was when we were going to go to the ring. And then it was like, here comes the axe. It was like perfect.
Yeah. He did a great job.
I thought you were going to sing the whole thing for a second, Barry, and I was ready for it.
You don't want me to be singing, that's for sure.
Another thing I've got to ask you about, obviously, is I chat regularly with Brian Clark, who's obviously very, very close to Bryan Adams. Obviously, Crush joins and Demolition turns into a trio. How did that change the chemistry, and how was it working with Brian, who was obviously pretty new to the industry at that point?
Well, Brian, and funny you mentioned Brian Clark. We just saw him at WrestleCon. He's a good friend of ours.
He gets around, doesn't he? Yeah, good lad.
Yeah, very, very good friend. And I met him years ago and here in Georgia, and we were close friends. But Bryan Adams I had already been approached to do an agent's position, and they were going to phase me out, and I was going to work in the office. So Brian Crush came in, and Crush was a great guy, but he was what we call green, inexperienced, but he was willing to learn, of course. And one of the big things that Demolition never did is we never flubbed up on our interviews. One of the things that we did, we first take, and it was set. And Brian hadn't been used to that pressure, because now he goes from a small territory out in Oregon to world stage, and he was a little nervous, and he made a couple mistakes in his interviews. Of course, the guys that are in the area listening are getting all over him. Demolition doesn't make mistakes, blah, blah, blah. Well, now he's even more self-conscious, and he'd make another mistake, but he didn't mean to. And I think that wore on him a little bit. But he, as far as being a competitor and wanting to learn, he did. It was fun to be with. I just think that, and Barry might add to this, it's hard to be in the main event and all that pressure on you and then be a little nervous too. And I think that wore on him a little bit. Wouldn't you say, Barry?
Oh, yeah. And, like Bill said, Brian was like the greatest guy in the world. I don't think there was a person who didn't like Brian. He was funny. He ribbed people. He was just a good guy. But it was almost like, you bring a guy in and you're phasing Bill out, and the tag team was Axe and Smash, and all of a sudden now Axe is on the side, and you got another guy in here, and it's just not the same tag team. And it had to be just so hard for him to come in and do that, and he did a great job. Yep. But the people look at that and they want to see the Demolition. Yeah. And it's hard to bring that third person in to do that. So, it was tough on him, but he did a great job.
I'm Marc Mero, former WWE Intercontinental Wrestling Champion and 3-time WCW World Television Champion. I am thrilled to announce the release of my new book, Bad to Good. The inspiring story of a wrestling wild man chronicles the highs and lows of my life, both in and out of the wrestling ring. It's a powerful narrative of overcoming adversity and the importance of perseverance, no matter how tough the journey gets. Co-authored with my good friend and award-winning journalist, Ben Veal, this is a story I've long wanted to share, and I truly hope it inspires you. I hold nothing back in this book, revealing the untold truths of my extraordinary life, from my modest beginnings and my first boxing match to the struggles with addiction that almost consumed me, and my evolution into the charismatic Johnny B. Bad. This book offers an insider's perspective on the world of professional wrestling and my journey as a sports entertainer. You'll read about my pivotal negotiations with Vince McMahon that led to the first ever guaranteed contract in the WWF, and how that decision marked me within the locker room. I discuss the impact of my relationship with my then wife, Rena, known to fans as Sable, on my career. I also confront the darkest moments of my life, how I hit rock bottom and how that experience sparked my rebirth, leading me to become America's leading motivational school speaker, inspiring young people and transforming lives. Featuring forwards by my good friends Diamond Dallas Page and Lex Luger, along with contributions from Mick Foley, Eric Bischoff, Vince Russo, and others who shared this wild journey with me. Bad to Good is a story you don't want to miss. Head to Amazon.com or WrestlingLife.online now to pick up your copy.
Yeah, I think he did an incredible job of being able to kind of bounce back from that, reinvent himself, and carve out the solo career that he did. I always felt, and I've said this to Brian numerous times, I always felt that Bryan Adams was one of the great big men who, for whatever reason, never really got a bigger push than he did. I always felt like he was so talented and should have done more within the business than he did.
And I don't know why, they really phased the Demolition out too. That was, I don't know, Bill, what are your thoughts? Why? Why did they do that? Was it because they didn't want the Road Warriors and the Demolition there at the same time, or you know what
Well,
I mean?
I think that's a little bit of it, but I think that they really made a mistake, and I don't think it was anything against us. When I look back, Vince wasn't happy with Hogan. He wanted to replace Hogan. He wanted to replace Warrior. He wanted to replace Stone Cold. He wanted to replace Savage. He wanted, it's like ride the horse until it drops and then we get a new horse.
Yeah.
But, you can't take anything personal in this business. There's a window of opportunity. Take advantage of that window and just move on. And, like Barry and I talk about it all the time, there's life after wrestling. There's life after WWE, and now we're back in WWE. So who would have thunk it?
Exactly. And also it's interesting because in this day and age with how kind of matches are booked, I'm positive that you would have seen Road Warriors versus Demolition, because we've got used to, big name versus big name, but that wasn't really the model back then, was it? There was so much more of this kind of the squash matches and all that kind of thing. Do you think that there was the characters were just too close to possibly have Demolition and Road Warriors together?
I don't think so. I think that there was a lot of people that, like I always have said, there's some Demolition fans, there's Road Warrior fans, there's Powers of Pain fans, and there's a lot of damn people who don't give a shit about either team. So I think that they missed the opportunity, and Barry and I have talked about this a number of times. They missed the opportunity because when we come out, I remember the first time in Cleveland, when we come out and the people start cheering us, they weren't really cheering us because they liked us. They were cheering us because they liked what we were doing. Well, somebody in the office says, well, they like these guys. They're cheering them. So they have to make a turn. Well, they didn't. And then again, the Road Warriors come in, and against us, they could have had us separated for a year and had a pay-per-view out of it. Mm-hmm. But they jumped the gun. So sometimes the people in the office don't make all the right match makeups.
Yeah, absolutely.
And I think when the Road Warriors came in, I think they thought that when they come in and introduce them, that there was going to be the biggest pop ever. Well, they were from the Southern Territory, and we were, embedded in the WWE, and those fans liked us. So there wasn't the reaction that the office really wanted. And then they put these goofy masks on us. They did everything to almost make us look bad, to make them look better, to make us heels. But it didn't work. And like Bill said, if they would have just not even put us together, never, not for a year, 2 years, and then do it, then it would have really meant something. Then you would have really had a heel team and a babyface team, and it would have exploded. But they jumped the gun on everything, I thought.
Yeah, I agree.
Did you ever get a chance to talk to Hawk and Animal about it at the time that you were working together?
Well, we were friends. Barry was much closer than I was because he grew up with him and he had known him for years. But I had known him for a number of years when they first came into Georgia. There was no animosity between the teams. I think they were just as confused of what was going on because they had made them some promises too that they didn't live up to. And if you remember, they left and they weren't happy. So it wasn't just against us or any particular team. There was a lot of times and a lot of individuals that were promised a lot of different things that were not fulfilled.
Yeah. I think it's the kind of turbulent nature of that time, isn't it? That in the early 90s, there were so many people that came in and moved on, as you said, from the Ultimate Warrior to Hogan leaving to Davey Boy Smith to Road Warriors to yourself. There was a lot of change in a very short period of time in the WWF.
Well, and it all depended on one person's choice at that time.
Yeah.
But I think, it probably still is one person's choice now, but that individual is a little more understanding, and I think he looks at it differently and how it's going to benefit. The other one was sort of a dictator.
Yeah.
I think the difference is too is Triple H was a wrestler. He started off, in a boxing ring in the middle of nowhere, getting beat up and worked his way up the ranks. So now he's in the office knowing really what the wrestlers do, where Vince was never went through that and actually didn't really like wrestlers. He the office and everybody else was more important than the wrestlers. Where I think, Triple H kind of looks at it the other way. I need the wrestlers to make the organization. And then the office, is in charge of those wrestlers. It's a whole different ballgame, I think,
Yeah, absolutely. It's that kind of, there was always that kind of thing about sports entertainment versus wrestling, and almost like this desire always to downplay the wrestling element, wasn't there? It felt for a longest time, like, don't talk about wrestling, it's all about entertainment. And it feels like we're getting much, but obviously with the UFC merger as well, and that legitimacy of professional wrestling as a sport and an art form in and of itself feels like that's much stronger now than it's been in a long time. As something else I've always been curious about, Bill, and I kind of wanted to wait until I had you online to ask this rather than ask Barry last time. After Demolition comes to a premature end, obviously Barry comes back with a very different character. This little guy that's right behind me, the villainous Repo Man, who, as Barry knows, was my favourite character as a kid. That's how we first got talking, because I absolutely loved the Repo Man. I couldn't get enough of him. Did you have a chance to see what he was doing on TV with the Repo Man at the time? And if so, what did you think of him?
Oh, yeah, I thought it was a great character. And, he probably told you that he actually did repossess vehicles. So, maybe not in that outfit, but he did the same job. And he might have done it in an outfit. He never told me.
So we never knew who it was.
Yeah. He did a good job with that. I mean, and he enjoyed it. And we get a lot of compliments on it. So evidently it touched a lot of people.
Yeah, there's a lot of Repo Man fans out there to this day.
I'm very grateful for that too, because the more doll sales, the better.
Absolutely. Well, look, to just kind of round out today, I mean, this WWE Legends deal that you signed that in February this year, I believe. And obviously that was, that's kind of the really big news that no one was really expecting, because for the longest time, as you say, you've been on the outside looking in of WWE. So what does that Legends deal mean? How does it come about? What does it open up for you now?
Well, we were approached by a friend of ours and a number of guys. Coco Beware was one of them. Tito Santana. They had told us that they had just been approached and made an appearance. And then we got a call from the office, and they were discussing various things, signing a contract, which would include making some appearances, of course, action figures, various action figures, not only Demolition, but Repo Man and Crusher Khrushchev and Mass Superstar.
That means WWE will get more of my money now, even more figures for me to buy.
Like I said, Mass Superstar and the Machines. So, I mean, the way they presented it, it sounded interesting, sounded like it could possibly be very lucrative for us, make some appearances, and also possible DVDs and some other things. So right now, we're at a wait and see. They did announce some action figures coming out when we were at WrestleCon, which got a very positive response. So, we signed the contract over multiple years. I believe it was 6 years. So we'll see what the next 6 years or 5.5 years leads to.
Absolutely. I'm excited to see what's to come. And I mentioned it at the start, the demo pod. So if we were to to turn back the clock 2 or 3 years, and someone had said to me that both The Undertaker and Demolition have had a podcast, I would have thought someone was telling jokes. How does it kind of,
Me too.
yeah. So tell me what the kind of the premise is for the demo pod and what you guys will be talking about on there. I know you're a couple of episodes in so far.
Well, we were approached by a good friend of ours, Tommy Fierro, and a couple other guys to do this for a number of, probably about a year, right, Barry?
Yeah, at least a year. Yeah.
And we did the first 2 episodes and really enjoyed it. And we're scheduled now to have a set schedule. So, I mean, it's like this. We have fun telling stories and behind the scenes stuff. One of the big sections is going to be the fans get to send in questions that we can answer. Hope we can answer them all. They have to be PG rated, I guess, but
probably not with a podcast. You can get away with anything really on these. You're fine.
You know,
my daughters and his grandkids will be watching it, so we don't want to get X-rated.
Yeah, and the hardest part of this whole thing is we're not real savvy with all the internet stuff and how a podcast works. And I mean, look at our cameras right here. Bill's is going up and down and mine's sideways.
Yeah.
So it's like, yeah, we want you guys to do a podcast. Well, it's like, a what? What's a podcast? But so the first couple are just trying to figure this thing out. That's half the fun of it. We're just having a good time. Well,
put it this way, I'm close to 100 episodes in now of podcasts, and I think I'm only just learning how to do it now. It took me a long time to even get a decent microphone, so you're fine. I think your setup has come on a long way since I last interviewed you, Barry. So I'm excited to see what comes next.
Yeah. Well, I hope we can kind of have a little studio here, and maybe Bill will have a little studio, But what would really be nice is when we're on the road together, if we could do the podcast on the road, from the hotel room or, at the WrestleCon one day or whatever. Do something a little bit different than what other people are doing.
Well,
and have some of our WrestleMates in there with us. And
yeah.
So, matter of fact, one of the guys you mentioned, Brian, had asked us to be on his, so he said he would volunteer to be on ours too. So we've already got our first guest lined up.
Oh, there you go. Well, yeah, shout out for Brian's new show, The Meltdown, which is co-presented by a fellow Brit, Tom Finkill. So they're doing great stuff as well. Launched similar time to you. So great to have more voices in this space. And that's a great thing about podcasting. Everyone helps out one another. Everyone jumps from one show to another. It's a lovely community, much like wrestling.
Yeah.
So how many views do you have then, Ben?
I think at the time of recording this, I'm closing in on about 30,000 subscribers. So it's taken a big jump since the last time we spoke, Barry.
Nice. Yeah, that has jumped. Yeah.
I've been very lucky to get to speak to some incredible people. I still find it very surreal that I am now doing this. My 8-year-old self would be fairly shocked by what I now do for a living. But it's because I've always had the passion for it. I've always had the respect for it. Even when I was very young and I didn't understand how the business works. And obviously it took me a few years to understand that maybe it's not all real, shall we say. I have always had huge respect for I've never really understood how. I've always understood how much travel was involved and sacrifice was involved. And certainly by the time I became a teenager, I became fascinated by how do these people have families? How do they do their grocery shopping? How do they live life? And as I've got older, that's the bit that's really fascinated me is, the wrestler's life on the road, especially the schedule that you guys were doing in the 80s. It's absolutely remarkable. It's something that I can't even fathom. I did a week and a half away in Philadelphia for WrestleMania last year, and that absolutely wiped me out. So I have nothing but the utmost respect for wrestlers and the schedules you keep and how you manage to do it all these years.
Yeah, it's difficult. That's probably the one thing that neither one of us missed, the travel part of it. It's easy to book the event, and it's easy when you're at the event, but getting to and from is the difficult part.
Well, speaking about that to and from now, I don't know how your flight is to Saskatoon, but
Oh my God.
holy cow, my flight home from Saskatoon, I got to fly to Vancouver, then Vancouver home. And then I got to drive 4 hours home. I got about a 20-hour trip to get home.
Oh,
Well, I'm
that's a
going
proper
to
wrestling
Chicago
booking.
to Toronto, then over.
Oh, jeez.
I don't know who. I think Mickey Mouse booked this thing.
Sounds like the WWF office back in the day booked it.
Right.
Well, by the time this episode goes out, you two will be safely back home. It will have been a successful trip with lots and lots of good memories made, I'm sure, and it will have all been worth it.
Yeah.
Yeah, we're looking forward to it. It's supposed to be a real good event.
And talking of big travel, I'm very much hoping, I know you guys came over for, I think it was the first For the Love of Wrestling in Manchester in maybe 2019 you came over.
Yeah.
I'm very hopeful that you'll be coming over again back to the UK, because I would love nothing more than to do one of these in person with you, which would be an absolute thrill.
Well, we'll let you and your interest and pressure
Yeah,
get us back over there.
absolutely. Fans would love to see Demolition back in the UK again.
And Ben, when I first met you, it's like we just don't go on anybody's podcast. We get asked, I don't know how many times a week we get asked if we do a podcast, and we don't do them. But when I met you to start with, and there was a few people that said, yeah, Ben's a good guy, go on it. And you do have a good show, and you do a good job on here. So that's why we're on here right now.
Thank you. And I can tell you exactly who that was. That was Brian Clark.
Brian Clark.
I remember he very kindly got in touch with you before WrestleCon last year and says, if this bald British guy comes up to you called Ben, do his show. So
that was Brian. Yep.
Yeah, Brian has been my fixer of relationships.
Well, good.
Well, look, I'm going to let you guys go. Thank you so much. I do a couple of thanks at the end as always, because obviously this is team. All of your success was teamwork. All of my success is teamwork. So, biggest thank you as always to my producer Jeff Easton from Tall Lake Productions. Like me, huge Demolition fan, so he'll love editing this episode. Thank you to my audience, which, as I mentioned, is growing week on week. I'm thrilled by how the show has taken off, and it gives me the chance to do more conversations like this. But most of all, thank you to Axe, thank you to Smash, thank you to Demolition for all the memories and for your time today.
Well, thank you, Ben. Nice to meet you.
You too.
And all the success, my friend.
Yeah, Ben, and we will see you in person in the UK one day. But thank you.
Absolutely. Thanks, guys.